Hello! From the Next Reels Film Board, this is Tommy Handsome with an important announcement. The following podcast includes movie audio clips that contain unbleeped profanity. Such profanity may include damn, hell, nuts, McGee, doodle, Captain Fuck, and toot toot, here comes the diarrhea parade. Listening discretion is advised.
Streaming services are on the rise, and brick-and-mortar video stores are a thing of the past. We have lost that experience of wandering the aisles and stumbling upon a film we've never heard of. We have replaced the familiar face behind the video store counter with an algorithm to recommend films. With more and more content available, it's harder to know what's worth watching and what might be a waste of your time. There are many hidden gems out there waiting to be discovered, and we want to help you find them. This is Trailer Rewind, a podcast where we discuss and review recently forgotten or overlooked films that are now available to stream at home. Hey Trailer Rewind listeners, it's time to pull back the curtain on Trailer Rewind. Today I am bringing our behind-the-scenes guy up front. This year, DeLancey has been editing our episodes to make us sound coherent, and today he's going to be in front of the mic to talk with me about The Lodge.
So, how would you feel about going to the mountains for Christmas with Grace? She really wants to get to know you guys.
That's our mom's hat.
I'm sorry.
You okay? I don't want to leave you here with the kids if you're not feeling up to it.
I'm feeling fine. It was my idea, and it's a couple days. I can do a couple days.
Okay, guys, I'm off. Have fun.
What is that?
It's Grace.
Everyone committed suicide except for her.
Repent, and you will find salvation.
This was Andy's pick from November 9th, 2019. Andy was very excited about it because it looked creepy in all the best ways. I had forgotten that this was a trailer that he and I saw together in the theater when we went and saw Parasite in the theaters. So we experienced this trailer together, and then he decided to bring it to the Satmat. Pete and I joked that this, based on the trailer, this movie could have been called Midwinter. And I think we'll get into that a little bit. But we all agreed that it looked really spooky. Today is September 19th, and The Lodge is available on Hulu. So doing a little digging into the release on this, it opened small. 6 screens on February 7th, 2020. Who was to know what was just merely a month away from that? But it took the typical slowly growing, because by the following week on Valentine's Day it was on 21 screens, and then it made a big jump to 322 screens the following week. And it had another big week at the beginning or at the end of February up to 395. So this was tracking like, oh, it's growing. And then beginning of March down to 96 screens, and then 19 screens, and then gone by March 16th. So it basically spent 6 weeks in the theater. But because this is 2020 and strange things happened, it did return on 8 screens for 3 days in July 10th, 11th, and 12th. I think they felt like that may have been like drive-in movies or something like that, where people thought, oh, we'll show a spooky movie at the drive-in. I know, but it had a really low box office, only 2.1 million domestically, with a worldwide take of just over 3 million. So what they did with this one is they quickly got this, on Blu-ray, digital, and Hulu, all right there, right on May 5th, 2020. So in theaters in February, available, digitally and on disc by May. So that's a typical what we see with some of these smaller films that, I don't know if this movie needed to be in the theaters. I guess there's always that, it's a darkened place that makes it a little bit creepier.
Sure.
But this is it's an interesting film, genre. And as we, Pete and I joked about it being called Midwinter, there's, I think that's the thing of, on film board, and we've done other horror movies. We've talked about there's this potential resurgence in the horror genre of exploring different dimensions of this, and there's some that do that really well. I think Happy Death Day to You we all really enjoyed over on the film board of taking the tropes of the genre and going in new directions. This one, I don't know, Ray. Who do you feel this film is for? And I will say, let's not get into spoilers into the end. At the end, we can get into that in the later part of the discussion. So let's try to stay a little spoiler free on this so we don't ruin it. But what would you say, like, your expectations were going into The Lodge?
So my expectations going into it, were actually kind of weird. I had no expectations because I saw this in the theater, but it was one of those situations where I hadn't even seen the trailer, hadn't even heard about this movie. I just saw it was playing and decided to go see it.
Wait, so you're telling me you'll just you'll walk into the movie theater and be like, what's showing at this time? Haven't heard of that. I'm going to go check that out.
Yes.
That's awesome. I love that because you know how I am about trailers. Like I don't like the experience of trailers ruining the experience. So you'll just show up, pick a movie and go. That's great.
I actually did that with Inception.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But after having seen the movie, though, I totally see where you and Pete make that joke because it feels like the kind of movie that the Ari Aster crowd would like.
Well, there's several sequences throughout where we have one of the kids has a dollhouse, and so there's lots of scenes where we'll see things that are set up in the dollhouse, which
right.
Resembles the lodge, the titular lodge of the film. So,
and it looks like that comes from Hereditary.
Right, exactly. We see, with Hereditary, with all of the little, miniature houses and all that. Yeah, other than it making me feel that and then expecting like I wanted to see, something like Hereditary, I don't know the timing on this film and that idea if they were trying to play that up or not. But it's a challenge when you set yourself up by a comparison or referencing another film that has been so successful that inevitably people will use that as a measuring stick to say, oh, well, how does this hold up compared to Hereditary? Right. And it's not going to. I think there's, that one has cemented itself as sort of a classic. Yeah. And so I think that was a bold choice if they tried to do that, and it's one that wasn't going to do them any favors.
Sure, yeah. I thought it was interesting to see the Hammer logo at the beginning of the movie.
Oh,
because
yes.
I think of Hammer and I think of like Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. And
yes. Oh, the 60s. Yeah.
And this, I mean, not that I'm like a Hammer connoisseur, but this really didn't remind me of anything Hammer.
No. Again, so setting expectations for something that they're not quite delivering on. So as you walked into this blind and experienced this, what did you get a sense of what, who would you say this film is for based on, the general beginning and middle of the film, what it's trying to be? What would you say?
You mean like age group or?
Well, just, other films that people might, if they liked that type of film, this is something that, might appeal to them.
In all honesty, I'm sticking with Hereditary, maybe Jordan Peele's Us.
Okay.
Maybe not so much Get Out. It felt more along the lines of Us to where it was more unexpected, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. And we've got sort of the family in isolation aspect of that. Yeah. It's one that, again, without getting into the spoilers, it sets up, we're in an isolated place. We've got some mysterious events going on, possibly supernatural things going on, and that's all things that are there in the trailer. And setting it in a snowstorm, creating that other sense of isolation. Very much like a Hereditary, where you've got the family dynamics confined in a house.
Well, and that being said about the isolation in a snowstorm, some aspects of it do have a touch of feeling like The Shining. Oh,
yes, very much that too. Here we are naming these movies like Hereditary, The Shining, and I will say right up front, this doesn't get quite to those levels.
It's little bits and pieces.
Yes, I think it's a film that is working in comfortable territory to a certain extent, and isn't going to quite get there. And I think that's one of the challenges of this, of what does it do new? And when we talk about the end later, we can talk about some of the shifts that happen, but the vast majority of this film is treading familiar turf and not doing anything altogether original or anything that overly impressed me. Now, this is not a genre I spend a lot of time in.
Sure.
But you've spent a little bit more time in sort of the horror genre, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so would you say it stuck with the familiar tropes, or did you see it do anything, or do you feel that it was more of a, for lack of a better term, copying some familiar ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, but it's not particularly memorable.
Okay, yeah.
Without spoiling, the first 8 minutes of this movie I thought were particularly good. But after that, not that it's bad, but it's just, it doesn't seem to try much that hasn't been done before.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. It had a very strong opening, and I think that set a bar that the rest of it just didn't live up to.
Right.
Because it did some things really well at the beginning, and I don't know that it was reaching for anything. I feel like it settled for, well, we're just going to do these things, and I think maybe they were counting on the twist at the end to try to be the strength of the film, and for me, I don't know that was that carried through. So we've got a horror film, a sort of thriller suspense thing. People that are interested in that genre probably may have already seen this. If it's not a genre that you tread in, I would say it's not as spooky and creepy as I think the trailer leads it to be. Because sure. I think a lot of the suspense and creepy moments are there in the trailer, whereas you spend a lot of time with these characters and there's strange things going on, but there are some films like a Hereditary where I get uncomfortable in my skin watching the movie, because I'm just this is really, particularly dark supernatural stuff just really creeps me out. And this never got to that point where I'm like, ooh, this is like darkly sinister stuff. This just felt like there's, these people in this lodge and there's some odd things going on, but I didn't have that sense of dread of like evil, lurking in the corners of my house. So if you are not a fan of horror films, this might be one to ease your way in. Back when we recorded the Sat Mat in November, Pete was just starting to venture into his fascination with horror. And I think this is one that, for somebody like that, might be a good entry point. Also because some of the familiar tropes and things might be new to you and fresh to you. So I'd say if you're new to the genre, you might find this one enjoyable. But Ray, overall, in terms of rating and ranking your movies, where'd The Lodge fall for you?
So on my flick chart, it fell, on my most recent viewing, it fell at 333 out of 1311, which is 75%. It did climb a little bit because I did appreciate it a little bit more the second time around. So it getting a 75% on my flick chart, it suggested a letterboxed star rating of 3.5, and I thought that I was comfortable with that. So I rated it 3.5 stars.
3.5. Okay, so for me, it came in at 316 out of 637. So it's right there in the middle. And again, because this is a genre that's not one of my favorites, there are some things that I'd appreciate, and I think that put it up a little higher. I put it right at 3 stars. I have some issues with it. There are things that I really like about it. And this is one where I feel like maybe in our conversation, you might be able to get me to that 3.5 at the end of this, depending on how the conversation goes on some of these things. Because
the pressure's on now.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like there are some things that worked really well, but sort of globally looking at this, The Lodge has a weighted average review on Letterboxd of 3.15 based on 33,684. On IMDb, it's right there at that six-star ranking based on about 25,500 votes. So it's right there in the middle. I think very middling, and I think that's probably feels right for me. It's a film that doesn't do anything great, but it's not a disaster. So listeners, if you think that this is your kind of film and you don't want anything spoiled, this is your chance to pause the podcast and go check out The Lodge on Hulu. So you're either sticking with us or you've gone and watched The Lodge, and now we can get into this and we can also get into spoilers. But as we talked about at the front end, the first 8 minutes. So Ray, tell me what it is about the opening. You seem to really enjoy the first 8 minutes of this film. So tell me what's so strong about that? What worked so well for you?
Steve, they could have taken the first 8 minutes of this movie and just made it a short film, and I would have given it 5 stars.
Okay.
Seriously.
What about it deserves those 5 stars?
So particularly, I'm looking at Alicia Silverstone's performance because she plays the mother of the 2 children who star in this film. Her name is Laura Hall, I believe. Yes, Laura Hall. And she's in the middle of a divorce with her husband, played by Richard Armitage. And she doesn't even really have that many lines in her 8 minutes of film, but in her face and in her movements and just the way that she executes her actions, like putting on makeup and curling her eyelashes, everything is done with such a subtle desperation, and you really feel pity for this person. Like, you feel like she is going through something that is really just hollowing out the depths of her soul in this divorce. And you know, without her even having to say it, that she needs to reconcile with her husband. She needs it because she is not taking this whole thing well. And then out of nowhere, after she meets with her husband says, look, we got to finalize this. I'm going to get married to Grace, this other woman. Alicia Silverstone is sitting alone at home, reaches for her purse. Her purse is, you can't even see her purse. It's obscured by the table that she's sitting at. And then real quickly, she pulls a gun out and shoots herself in the head 8 minutes in.
Yes. It's a slow shot that's just slowly pushing in on her as she's sitting there at the table. Because you get the emotional, she's gotten this news. She's wrestling with that. And I was watching this with my youngest daughter at the time. And when she pulls the trigger, puts the gun in her mouth and the back of her head, just all over the wall, my daughter just like jumped out of her chair.
Right?
She's like, it just, cause it's so quiet and it comes out of nowhere. And it's so strong, so powerful because there's so much. It's you think this film is about her from the beginning. You're getting the sense because we start with her and it's the conversation with the kids and it's so much about her. And then, she's out of the picture now, which for me, I think sets up an interesting setup with the kids of, your mom's Alicia Silverstone, and just in her performance, there's this caring mother, the connection with her kids. It's going to be this specter that sort of haunts the rest of the film because as Grace comes in as the other woman, you've got the ex-wife has committed suicide. So it's not just that the kids are upset that, parents are divorced and dad's remarried. It's dad remarried you and mom killed herself. So now there's that to deal with that's going to sort of haunt the remainder of this film of the kids not only being angry about the divorce, but now their mother is gone and they can only blame, do they blame their dad or do they blame Grace? And
Right.
that's where we're going to get going with sort of the story as things move along is we then our introduction to Grace is very interesting because we don't see her
Right.
like it's through like frosted glass with the kids are there and Grace wants to come in to talk with the kids and dad's like no, and then that's where we get a scene of the kids discovering sort of I guess they know a little bit about Grace because we get one line at Thanksgiving where the son who's played by Jaden Martell, Aiden says, Dad, didn't you meet her because you were, she was in your book, you were writing a book about her. And so it's like, well, what is that? And there's, Dad's a psychologist. So, okay, who's this Grace character? Then we get the scene where Jaden and his sister are on the computer. So Aiden and Mia on the computer researching Grace and finding out she was part of this cult that basically committed mass suicide. And there's video footage that they find online or it's on Dad's computer. And it's very reminiscent of the cult from I can't remember the Heaven's Gate
Heaven's
cult.
Gate, yeah.
Yes, because you see them all with the fabric over them and the tennis shoes and all of that. And, which to me, that's some of the creepiest footage in this film because it's old school like video footage of going down into this room and seeing this. And then the reveal is that Grace is the one that filmed this because apparently it's her role to continue carrying the message forward of that group out into the world. So Grace is coming out of a really odd situation,
to say the least.
Right, exactly. So the interesting dynamic that it set up for me, though, is the other piece, I guess that's crucial, is that her father is the one that's the head of the religious cult.
Yes.
So we've got this dynamic of she has lost her father. We've got these two kids that have lost their mother. So you think, oh, well, clearly they're going to, they've all lost parents, right? They're going to be able to connect with each other. Oh, heck no, because Grace is the reason their mother is dead, right? So there's this great animosity between the kids and Grace. And it sets up, I think, Grace as a suspicious character.
Sure, yeah.
Has she come to terms, what are the consequences of growing up in that type of environment, whether it's being brainwashed or, abused or whatever we may call it? That sets up Grace as a suspect character.
And here's another thing. The film never really specifies, but I found myself wondering, is Grace the reason for their divorce? Was Richard having an affair, or did he meet her after the fact? We don't know.
No, we don't know. We know that he met, they at least met through work, but we don't know the timeline of the divorce. But clearly, it's also the dynamic of she's younger. So, Grace, played by Riley Keough, younger than Alicia Silverstone. So it's the stereotype of like, oh, guy meets younger, attractive woman through work thing and leaves his wife for her. So that's typical, right? Leaving your wife for a former cult member, maybe not so typical.
And speaking of Riley Keough, did you know that the guy that played her father in the movie is her father in real life?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. There. Yes, I'm looking at that in the credits right now. Okay, interesting. I did not know that. I did not do my research on this. Yes. There we are. Very interesting. So we finally, Dad, Richard, decides what's going to be the best thing. Let's take everybody up to the lodge for Christmas. We're going to spend time in isolation, away from everybody. We'll spend time together. This will be the thing that everybody needs to get together. So of course, Dad gets there, and then quickly he has to leave. He's got a work thing. He's got to go back, but he's going to be gone for a couple of days, and then he'll be back. So it's, Grace, it'll be a great time for you and the kids and bonding and all that stuff, getting everything ready for Christmas, right? So we get the first days at the lodge, right? So Richard leaves, and I'm thinking, okay, they're in the middle of nowhere, but the kids, it's familiar turf for the kids, because he says, well, if anything happens, the kids know the people at whatever, the convenience store or whatever. Right. And so so it's not like they're completely isolated. The family comes there regularly, so the kids know things up there, right?
I want to know why he thought this would be a good idea. They hate her. It's obvious they hate her. And he's like, well, I'm going to leave my new girlfriend, my fiance, alone in this house with them. Right. Not only that, but he's familiar with this area that this house, this lodge is in. He doesn't think there's going to be any problems getting back to this lodge.
One snowstorm, and that's it. The roads are closed, and he's but there's it's 2019 or whatever, right? You've got cell phones, and there's other ways. Nothing's totally isolated, right? Sure. What could go wrong, right? So it's we've got a very icy environment externally and internally, because sure, they're setting up for Christmas and all that, but basically the kids have secluded themselves in one part of the house in one room, and Grace is sort of left to her own devices, roaming the house. We get a lot of quiet shots around the house of things. We've got Grace's dog is set up in a dog bed. There's one night, and dog hears something. There appears to be something on the stairs. We don't know what it was, a quick shadow, something, but is there somebody in the house? Is there something in the house? We don't know. It's setting up all this sort of the creep factor, right? Of that. So something's going to happen. And that's where we we get, I don't know, Aiden is, teenager. I didn't know how to take the scene where Grace is showering and then she sees that Aiden's watching her. Yeah. And like, that just like, who's the creep in this one now? What's going on here? This is okay. Is that typical teenage boy behavior? Maybe, I don't know, but it seemed a little like, and I think it unsettled Grace quite a bit of like, I've got this pervy teenage boy that is going to be my stepson, right. All of that. So we get to a scene where that has happened. It's clear the kids don't want to be interacting with Grace, and she wants to do what she's supposed to do. She wants to connect with these kids. She wants to get past everything, and she reaches out to Aiden. And this is a scene that starts with her in the kitchen making sandwiches, and she offers, to make Aiden a sandwich. He said, no, I can do that on my own. And they have, she confronts him basically about this.
I think we need to have a conversation, Aiden.
What?
I just feel like things are very uncomfortable between us, and I just wanted to know if there's something I can do to make that better, or what your problem is.
Hormones.
Okay, I feel like there's something you're not saying to me, or I just want you to know that I'm here if you want to talk to me about anything.
Why would I talk to you?
Because we're stuck in a house together. I didn't mean stuck. I meant we're in a house together. I want to be in the house. I mean, I didn't mean that. I just meant it would be a lot better, I think, for both of us if we could talk.
I don't want to talk to you.
You don't want to talk to me? Okay. You don't want to talk to me, you just want to watch me in the shower. You don't have anything to say to me. I just wanted to try and make things better.
And for me, this scene is... So I've watched the film, and then I went through and, looking at scenes again. And in this one, it really feels like Grace is making this earnest effort to connect with Aiden. And so for me, at this point, she's become the more sympathetic character.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
At this point, because Aiden's playing like, indifferent teenager with an attitude and all of that. And the way it's shot is the cinematography. There's some things that are done really well. There's a lot of like odd close-ups on Grace of rather than just shooting her straight on, we're slightly above her in the kitchen. We put some weird angles on her that just make it a little bit more interesting to look at. And whether it's we're observing her, putting her in a different place. But for me, this scene is crucial because of what happens next, because this is her reaching out. And then what we get right after that is, she's trying to make amends. Then the very next scene, they're watching The Thing, which again, if you're going to be doing a horror, thriller, don't pick a classic like The Thing to put in there, because everybody's like, that's such a great movie. Why am I not watching that movie instead of this movie, right?
And you know what? I don't think you can trust Grace after this scene, because she turns off The Thing and puts in Jack Frost with Michael Keaton.
Which is a more typical Christmas movie, I guess. I don't know. But at this point, Aiden brings her hot chocolate, and it's, okay, has he had time to think about what Grace is trying to do? And has he realized, okay, we're going to have to deal with each other, as Grace sort of, misspoke in the kitchen of like, we're stuck with each other. But he reaches out. It seems, he gives her some hot coffee, or hot chocolate. And then Mia is cold. So he brings in like the gas heater, which puts Grace at unease because this isn't her turf. She doesn't come to the lodge. This is not her lifestyle. She's grown up in a very different type of lifestyle. So her concerns are, is that safe, right? I'm having, with this gas and all that. And Aiden assures her, no, it's fine. It's fine. And then for me, this is the big pivot that happens in the movie, because Grace, they fall asleep watching the movie. And then when she wakes up, things are different. And I guess the piece we haven't talked about is we see that Grace is on medication. We don't know what medication or for what for. She's having trouble sleeping. She's had some unusual dreams, and that may be either part of the meds or just, her own mental state. So when she wakes up the next day, for me, the question is, do we have unreliable narrator now? Has Grace started? Is this another dream? Because I think she wakes up, or in her dream, she's like out on the lake, right?
Yeah, she's like laying on the frozen lake.
Right, exactly. And is that a dream? Is that real? They wake up. She wakes up. She I guess falls back asleep. She wakes up in the house. Anyway, we're now at a point where all the Christmas decorations are gone. Everything is like started to disappear out of the house. There's no food in the refrigerator.
The food is gone. All of their personal belongings, their coats are gone.
Right. The power is out. Her meds are gone. What is going on? And this is where we get into what's sort of supernatural things are going on in the house. Nobody seems to understand what's going on, what has happened, who did it. I think it set us up as viewers to think, because we've seen Grace like maybe sleepwalking at night. Is this something that she has done because she's this questionable, has this questionable background with some mental health issues? Is it something that she's done in her sleep? Is it something that she has consciously done? Because there's this animosity between her and the kids, sort of, I guess, epitomized by Mia's doll, which I think is like it's a Barbie or something, but with blonde hair, but clearly sort of is a stand-in for mom.
Right. And I think that doll is definitely a representation of her mom. And, you see Mia's attachment to it. It very clearly parallels the attachment that she had with her mom. If you remember the scene where they had Laura's funeral and she tried to attach the doll to the balloon.
Oh, yes.
And send it up with the rest of them. And then, obviously one balloon is not going to carry off a doll. And
right.
So Mia gets upset, like really upset, and rips the balloon string and off of the doll and sends it back up.
I had forgotten about it. It's almost like here I want to send my mom with the balloons up to heaven, and she's not going to. She's stuck here on Earth. And I guess that's the other piece that I guess we should probably briefly discuss is a lot of the like religious iconography around the lodge.
Sure,
Richard says that's his ex-wife's stuff, who was, religious. We've got, crucifix. We've got weird painting of
Mary.
So there's all of these things. So we have, I guess we've got that other opposition of Grace growing up in the cult and then being confronted with like traditional like Catholic iconography, and what does that do for her? Is it bringing up memories? Is it, counter to her belief system? All of that. Is it just more reminders of the woman she's replacing? I mean, all of these things add to that, I guess, that the creepiness factor to it. Nothing overtly sinister, but clearly Grace is on edge because of all of these things. The kids are upset, and it's a weird environment, right?
Oh yeah.
This is a weird lodge. And doesn't Mia have like a little shrine or something that she's got?
It's so weird. It's like, I don't even know what you'd call that area. It's like a little nook or something that's in the, was it in the bedroom or the attic? I can't remember.
And again, that's one of the things that's challenging with this film is the geography of the house is challenging. We don't get a good sense of where we always are, because there's an attic, but there's the kids' room, and it's maybe a nook off the kids' room.
Right. But either way, regardless of where it was, it's like this little shelf on the wall, and that's all that's around there. It's like by itself. It's very, it stands out. And it's got a crucifix on it. It's got these candles, and then she puts her doll on it.
Yes. Yes.
It's like it's almost some kind of, like you said, a shrine or some kind of, what do you call it whenever you lay out your dead?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what it's supposed to be, but it's very weird.
It's very weird. And it's things like that I started wondering, like, I don't have an explanation for why the kids are doing this. It seems odd. It seems unsettling. Is the movie just trying to be weird to be weird? Is it trying to be creepy just to be creepy? Why are these things happening? And then that's where I always come back to, is this Grace's mental state? Is that what we're supposed to be getting? Is, she's feeling, unsettled. And so things that might seem normal seem odd. And I thought, no. Doll on a shelf with candles and crucifix is odd in anybody's mind. It's not her. The picture, the painting of Mary, yeah, that's a little odd. And she takes that down. She takes the crucifix down at a later point. I'm like, okay, those are things that remind you of, Richard's ex-wife, and that's fine. But yeah, things have shifted into the weird. And so now there's no power, there's no food, their cell phones have died because they were on the chargers, the power went out. So nobody has a working phone, so they can't even contact Richard to say, hey, the power's out, can you send help? They're off on their own. So, and
that's one thing, if I can interject real quick.
Yeah.
You made mention earlier, whenever Richard left, that the kids have been there before. There's a general store not too far away that they can go to if they need help. I wondered, why didn't they ever try to go there?
I don't know how far it is. Yeah, that's one of the things, because they don't have a vehicle, right? I mean, Richard took the car. So, and that's where this is the challenging decision that Grace makes, exacerbated by the lack of her medication. Her mental state is starting to degrade. And it's whether, she can't sleep as well, odd dreams, all of that. The time has shifted to like January 9th, and she resets the clock back to the day that it should be. And she confronts the kids about this, who changed the clock, all of that, and again, the question is she doing it? Is something else more supernatural doing it? What's going on? So Grace finally gets to the point where she is going to make the walk to town. I guess she's, given the fact that she's new to the area, but of course you can't send, the kids because, what are you going to tell Richard? Well, the power's out, so I sent the kids off into the woods by themselves. Now that's not going to, she's the responsible adult. She's going to do this. And so she takes this journey out into the snow, which is very chilling, it isolates her. Again, whether she's having hallucinations because she's hearing the voice of her father about repenting, and is it this guilt that she's feeling about the fact that, Richard has decided to marry her? Is that responsible for the death of his wife? Is this guilt that she's carrying? The kids don't like her. I mean, there's a lot of things working against her. And now, hearing her father's voice about repenting. And then I think that's, as she's out on the walk, she comes across some type of building and looks like
it's real weird looking.
Yeah. And she thinks she sees somebody in there. And I'm assuming she thinks it's like the ghost or image of her father. But it's dang cold out there.
Yeah. And that's another thing about the cold. It's really hard to get across in a movie and on a visual medium just how cold it is. And I really loved the visual of her pulling the water bottle out of her bag and it's completely solid ice.
Yes, it really reinforced that. It's not just like, oh, it's a little bit chilly, you can see your breath. It's cold enough that it's frozen the water bottle. She's out there. So she gets disoriented, gets turned around, and basically walks in a big circle. So she doesn't get to town. She ends up back at the lodge. She's been out in the cold forever. And as she walks up to the house, she sees something in the snow. And she, is trying to brush away the snow, and it looks like it's some flowers and then like a picture in a picture frame. I don't know what any of this is. Again, what's going on? We should probably also mention that her dog has disappeared. The dog is gone. We don't know what has happened with the dog. So when they woke up and everything else disappeared, the dog also disappeared. So now we've got all these weird things. She's tried to get to town but can't get there, whether, disoriented or other supernatural circumstances possibly. She finds this picture, and that's where we get to, I think, the other critical point in the story where the characters are sort of going to confront what their situation is. And this is Aiden has found the photo that she found out in the snow and brings it in and confronts Grace about the photo.
Grace? What is this?
I don't know, Aiden.
We're stuck here and we don't know what's going on, and this picture, what does it mean?
I don't know what that photo means, Aiden.
What if we died?
We didn't die.
How do you know? If we had died, how would we know?
Because it makes no sense. Because I'm sitting here talking to you, and because my feet are cold and I'm hungry.
Maybe that's what it's like. We wouldn't know if we died.
And for me, this is where the movie hit its other gear of this idea that they died.
Yeah.
It reminded me of what's the Nicole Kidman one, the Others, right? Where
Yes.
You know, it reminded me of that. And then again, I thought, oh, you're going to do this which I remember being a really good movie. And now I'm like, okay, now we're doing that thing from this other movie. And I'm like, you're not quite as good as that, but I don't know if that's where you're going with this, right? But now we're confronted with the fact that it's possibly that they are dead. So what does that mean? The kids have found, there's another document that they find that, a news clipping, news article that they
like,
died.
The local newsletter.
Right. That they died from, what was it, like carbon monoxide poisoning or something? Allegedly, I think we're led to assume from the gas.
Yeah. It's from the gas, which goes back to Aiden saying he had a dream.
Right. Oh, yes.
In the first clip.
Yes.
That he had a dream that they all suffocated to
That's
death.
right. So now it's the question of, are they dead? Aiden's convinced that they're dead, and he's going to prove that to her. He runs off. Grace is upset. She doesn't know what's going on. And this is where, then Mia starts screaming. And then there is Aiden, who has hung himself from up there, and
the light fixture in the attic.
light fixture in the attic. And this is where, like, Grace, I think this is where she, like, snaps. Right. This is where
yes,
things,
definitely.
she is, if they're dead, what does that mean? I think it's bringing back everything that, from her history of the way she was raised, has she died? Is this what death is supposed to be like? All of these things. I'm thinking this is really interesting. Where are we going with this? And then the big twist happens because Grace has really snapped. And then the big reveal is the kids have been gaslighting her this whole time, which blew my mind. And I thought, for me, that works amazingly well. These kids are the worst children ever. Right? Yes.
And you know what? I am so glad that you chose these two particular clips to show for this show. Show for this show. All right. But because it really shows not just how empathetic a character Grace is, but also how contemptible Aiden is.
Yes.
When you look back at that first clip, that we played, Aiden, what is his response to being called out for peeping at her? Any normal kid, at least I would imagine, would like turn red in the face, get really embarrassed. He acts, like you said, completely indifferent. Like he doesn't care about her.
Right.
He has no respect for her. He couldn't care less. And that says volumes about how he views her as a person, which, to be honest, he doesn't really view her as a person.
Right. It's as going back and, as you've seen it a second time, you can, this is one that works really well where the things that I had questioned earlier, now I see them in a different light. So the kids always secluding themselves, clearly that's when they're planning, this whole thing, everything that they're going to do. And all the things that are creepy and odd are things they've been doing. Yes, would Mia normally have set up a little shrine? No, but if we can do some creepy thing, I mean, how do we, playing into the occult aspect of things, knowing Grace's background with the religious cult, we see the CD player or whatever, or speaker that they've set up in the attic with the recording of her father, from the video that they watched of Repent and all of this. So she hasn't been having auditory hallucinations. The kids have actually been, gaslighting her with all these things. And going back to the scene where he gives her the hot chocolate, and then Mia says she's cold, and Aiden looks at her and says, "Do you want me to get the gas heater?" Sort of checking with Mia of, you're on board with this. We're going through with this. And then Mia says yes. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go get the gas heater. And that is initiating everything, because that's when that night, clearly he's drugged her hot chocolate to knock her out so they can do all of this. So that was sort of we're past the point of no return. Once I go get this gas heater, we're executing the plan. And, we find out that Grady, the dog, got out on accident. Grace found him out there frozen to death. Mia feels horrible about that during whenever they were relocating stuff or whatever, Grady got out. And that's why he was gone. It wasn't part of the plan, but so that she's got this guilt about it. So now that the gaslighting gets revealed, but Grace is gone. She has snapped at this point. And this is where it became the next phase of this movie of Grace has snapped and has reverted back to basically where she was with her family cult.
And it is incredibly unsettling.
Yes. So, I mean, Richard finally gets there. Richard gets shot, which I love the setup for that. It's, these are some of the strengths of this, because we've got, before Richard leaves, he takes Grace out, practice shooting, just in case they have to defend themselves, just precautions, whatever. She's a crack shot. So clearly she knows how to handle a weapon. And it's in the context of, okay, is she an appropriate protector of the children? We get that information when Richard comes back after Grace has snapped. It's, oh no, Grace has a gun. We know she's a good shot. This is not going to go well. So she shoots Richard, and then, I mean, the final scene of them at the dinner table, and then it's the callback to the video of sort of the ritual mass suicide, because they've got the duct tape over the mouth with sin written on it, and the kids are strapped there at the table. We don't see what happens, but we've got a pretty good idea of where things are going to go from there with Grace, because she is off the deep end, off of her meds. The kids have pushed her into a state of, mental breakdown. All the audio stuff from her father has just brought all of this stuff back, and she's reverted back to who she was prior. And those final moments, I'm thinking, see, kids got what you deserve, didn't you? You go mess around with somebody that's mentally fragile, and this is what's going to happen. I mean, it's not the film that I was expecting. In some ways, it's a lot better than that, because it's not a supernatural horror film. It's a film about how we deal,
more of a psychological thriller.
Yes, it's how we cope with trauma and grief, because the kids are grieving, and their reaction is to lash out, and unfortunately they lash out against somebody that's I would say mentally fragile, and they push her, and they get the you reap what you sow, right? But it's really about the dangers of how, if we don't respect each other, if we don't know how to grieve, if we don't know how to communicate and be human with each other, deadly things happen if we don't treat each other, respectfully as human. It's why I picked that scene with the kitchen of Grace is making that effort to reach out. She knows she's not in a winning position. She makes, she says, we're stuck here. And then she tries to backpedal off of that. And it's clear that she's just as uncomfortable as the kids are, but she's reaching out to them, but the kids don't. And that's, such a powerful statement of, if we don't teach kids how to handle their grief appropriately, rather than, yes, it's horrible. And I guess we could always blame Richard of like, you idiot, why did you leave them all in the lodge together? That is the worst decision to make. Being a psychologist or whatever he is, he should have, had some clues. But for me, it's a film that's in a genre that I enjoy more than if it had been just Grace is sort of some weird, supernatural conduit for some evil cult or whatever it is, bringing, supernatural forces into the world to punish the children. That doesn't interest me as much as this, because it's really about, us as human beings and the evils that we're capable of, and how even the most simple things of, we're just going to play pranks on her can go terribly, terribly wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big takeaways from this movie is how terrible it is to be cruel to people, because, I mean, it's one of those things you hear all the time. You don't know what that person's been through,
right,
but it's the truth. I mean, you look at Grace, she grew up being indoctrinated by this cult, and it really didn't help matters that her dad was the leader. Right. I mean, people that come out of religious backgrounds and leave them tend to have a really hard time connecting with people, because they're so used to what they were taught, especially more gung-ho, I guess you could say, that teach, everybody is evil and they need to come to the light or whatever.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. It's, when that belief system is based on being in opposition to the world, so you've already felt isolated, because it's it's your small community. It's us, small group, against a world of evil, and so then she's got that sort of oppositional, background, and so for her, it's even more to how do I connect to be part of a family, and do that, and what does that look like when I was trained that anybody outside of my group was evil and bad, and of course that's only reinforced here by the actions of these kids. But I think the film, like I said, there's issues in the middle. It starts really strong and it ends really strong. The middle, it's the architecture of getting all the pieces in place, and there's not anything that I can say is clunky. It's
Sure.
I think part of it is the challenge of you've got to hide some things, and so that creates this, well, why are they doing this, or why is this happening? And that part went a little bit too long, where I didn't have enough to start piecing it together. But the performances from Jaden Martell and Riley Keough in this, I mean, those two carry this film. I mean, Richard is there for a little bit. Leah McHugh as Mia is there, and does contribute to that. But I mean, really, most of the screen time is with Riley and Jaden. And for both of them, I mean, people know Jaden from It, Knives Out. Yes, exactly. So, I mean, this is one that I think, unfortunately, is probably going to be overlooked by a lot of people, but a really solid performance from him. Riley Keough, I remember seeing her in like Logan Lucky, and again, this is one where really impressed. I mean, there are so many little things. There's a lot of close-ups on her. One of the shots that will forever stand out in my mind is the right before Aiden confronts her with the photo and says, what if we're dead? She has just come back from being out in the woods, and, she's got a little frostbite on her nose and cheeks and all that. There's a close-up of her hand on her knee. She's wearing jeans, and it's her hands, and she's sort of like scratching at the denim, and it's this sense of like, somebody that's been off their meds, nervous anxiety and all this, and it's the sound of the scratching and just the tension in her hands tells me everything that I need to know about where Grace is at that point of just like, I tried to go get help, but I can't, and I'm stuck here. And then Aiden comes in and unloads this whole "what if we're dead" thing, and I'm like, there's so many of those moments in the performance where it's little things and the camera work that accentuates them. That there's a lot of really strong points, but for some reason it comes together as a film that I feel like it might be, there's moments that'll stand out, but overall it's a forgettable film. That's what I wish there was more to it, and I can't pinpoint what it could have done differently. Because like I said, I love the sort of the theme that it's presenting. I love the performances. There's just something in the middle that it just the like act 2 lull of, we have to get through all this so that all the pieces are in place for the big reveal at the end. And I just wish there had been a way that had been executed a little bit more strongly, but I can't say, if they had done this or that. And I don't know what it is, which frustrates me, because I think this film deserves to be a slightly better film. And maybe it is the references to other films like allusions to The Shining, The Thing, all of these things that were putting, some thoughts in my head about it, but it does work. It's, I enjoy it. Maybe I'll go to 3.5 stars on this. I don't know.
Well, you know something? I think that was exactly my issue the first time that I saw this movie, was because I didn't know exactly what was going on. I didn't know, am I supposed to be able to put these pieces together? Right. I don't know what's going on. That was exactly my problem. But here, talking to you, I'm convinced now that this film's biggest problem is its over subtlety.
Okay. Yeah.
If that's a word. Yeah. And because there are so many things that I caught on second viewing that really amped up my appreciation for it. And all of those things were really subtle. Mm-hmm. And it was just too subtle. If they had let those things come out into the light a little bit more to give us, not give it away, but to give us just a little bit of a clue as to where things might be going, I think that it would have grabbed our attention more. It would have kept us kept our eyes glued to the screen a little bit more. Not that this was boring or anything, and I think that it would have been a little more involving.
Well, this might be a film that's better on a second watch. I mean, I'm not going to make a direct comparison to it, but I mean, another film that did that for me was The Lobster, which when I watched that, my brother had already seen it. We were watching together. He's laughing out loud. I'm like, what are you laughing at? This is disturbing and weird. Then I watched it a second time with my wife, and I'm laughing, and she's looking at me like, what? Because once you get through it, you know. And I think that's the same thing with this is if you know that it's not the supernatural, horror thing, that it's more of a psychological piece. And on a second viewing, seeing, as you said, all the pieces that are in play and understanding how they're as they're part of this whole gaslighting plan, you sort of appreciate the masterwork that these kids put together to do all of this. And you can see those pieces, like, as I said, knowing that, okay, that hot chocolate is most likely drugged and, these pieces. I think go through it the first time, give it its room that it needs, and then give it a week or two and go back and rewatch it. I think there's a deeper appreciation that because you're more oriented to everything rather than being in that mindset of like, what am I supposed to be thinking? What am I supposed to be feeling? Am I supposed to be understanding this? Versus now I know what the plan is. I have that sense. I think on a rewatch, this will be, better appreciated by people. Okay. For
sure.
All right. Well, I covered everything I had in my notes, right? I don't know if there was anything else that stood out to you that you wanted to mention before we wrap it up.
One last thing. At the beginning of the episode, I said there wasn't anything memorable about this movie, but I'm actually going to repent.
Repent. Okay.
Oh, see what I did there.
All right. Okay. Ray's repenting.
I'm the worst dad joker ever. But, there is one thing that does stick out to this movie that is memorable for me, and it is the use of the song Nearer My God to Thee. And see, like that song, memorable to me because of Titanic.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen Titanic in 20-something years, so it's not fresh in my mind. Okay.
Well, they don't sing the words, but they play the music to that song as the ship goes down.
Okay. All right.
And so that song, even though it's a church hymn, has always been associated with Titanic for me. Okay. And now I'm watching this movie, and its usage in this movie, especially in the final scene, has really given it a brand new meaning.
Okay. So it's shifted from Titanic to the Lodge for you. Because that's one of the challenges when you pick a familiar hymn like that. I think sometimes it's easy to use that. It's like, oh, it's got religious associations with people, so we can push that into the, sort of religious fanatic, piece, and it becomes creepy or odd or unusual, or it can put us in a weird place, or it can be a familiar thing in an unusual context, which that could work either for you or against you. But you're saying the song's been reclaimed for the Lodge versus Titanic for you, huh?
It might be. At the very least, I'm going to think, okay, where's the dead dad at the table whenever I watch Titanic, Oh, he's in the lifeboat.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us and listening in on our discussion of The Lodge. If anything we said here entertained, educated, or even enraged you, we'd like you to tell people about this podcast. Whatever your podcast listening platform is, please share, rate, or write a short review. It helps other podcast listeners find us. If you enjoy connecting with other film fans, you can become a member of our community over on Discord. It's free, and there's always an interesting dialogue or debate to jump into. Right now, lots of discussions about Tenet and whether that, has doomed movie theaters to never open again, what's going on with releases, when will we ever get to see Wonder Woman and Black Widow, and just, general, tracking each other's reviews, seeing what everybody else is watching and getting some tips on some overlooked movies that you need to watch. I know Ray just, wrote up a review of Calvary, a film that I've owned digitally for many, many years, have never gotten around to, but based on his review, it's one that I'll be putting on my watch list to watch soon. Woo. All right. Well, Ray, I had a great time talking with you about The Lodge.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Well, everybody, Hondo.